Hello, everyone. Just giving a moment to get started. A couple more minutes before we kick it off. Kick it off right at 12 Eastern. All right. Welcome, Permit community. We are excited to get going with the final day of the CLI launch week. Today, I am your host, Thomas Kirk. I'm a solutions architect at Permit and going to walk you through another one of the functions of the CLI. Really, there's a lot of functionality that Gabriel covered this week, and we also have a raffle drawing at the end, and hopefully can kind of see how you can do some advanced CLI usage, especially around how Rego is used and custom Rego is used at Permit. Generally speaking, Permit has out of the box a huge coverage of policy models like RBAC, ABAC, and REBAC. But sometimes we know that customers need some advanced configuration, advanced deny rules, allow rules, the ability to do ands and ors, and any sort of configuration that Permit doesn't support out of the box. And now you can do these sort of configurations with the CLI. So today we're going to walk through setting up your project, a specific Permit project with GitHub, so that the code synchronizes to a repository. This is a general best practice anyways. You should be receiving all your Rego, at least for open failover. It's a good idea. It's something Permit recommends. And it works currently, the CLI works with GitHub. So we can kind of automate some of these CLI integrations and to kind of get started. Feel free to follow along and work with me. I also have comments up. Good to see everybody chatting. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat, and we will answer them live. All right, let's get started. So as you see here, this is the Permit CLI. First thing we're going to do is actually install. I do have this installed, but we're going to run the command anyways to install this globally so that I can use the CLI. This pulls everything down and gets the environment set up. Now we have the CLI started. So you'd see here that we do have, let's try a login. Great. It's going to log in. And so now it's going to say, hey, choose a, we actually don't want to do this. What we want to demonstrate today is around what the CLI does, specifically GitOps. And so if we come down here to custom Rego, open GitOps, we'll click here and look at this. So there is we can, like I said, we can synchronize all of your policy. Anything that's generated from a Rego perspective can be synchronized down into the Git repository. We host one in the SaaS for you, but we also give you the flexibility to host this yourself. And this is nice because you can run any sort of test against it like you would any other code. This is the core kind of policy as code scenario. You could use permit without ever knowing any Rego or Cedar. You can just use our interfaces to define your policy without ever knowing what's powering it behind the scenes. Use the SDKs to make check functions and get user permissions and things like that without knowing. So this is more of an advanced use case. You see here that the kind of first option we're going to do is create a GitHub integration. Now there's a few options here, one of them being inactive. We don't really care about this right now, but you can have multiple connections and have one in active or inactive mode within the project. And these specific GitHub connections are actually tied to a project. So if we come in here to the projects inside of Permit, see I have a default one that everybody gets created with when you land on your home screen. But I've created one, which is the live demo CLI for the sake of this. And there's no permissions in here yet. It's pretty blank. And we'll walk through creating some of these. So I'm going to go ahead and make this call. And cancel out of that. This is also going to log me in, which is great. And then I'm going to have to choose a project. Again, the project I want to do is the live CLI demo. This is going to first create me an API key at the project level. API keys are scoped between environments, projects, and workspace. Specifically to handle the GitHub and GitOps integration, you have to have a project key or something higher. So either a workspace or a project. Recommended to use a project. The first thing you're going to do is enter in a repository key. So this is just a naming convention at Permit so that we know which repository to use. Like I said earlier, you can have multiple repositories and one in active and the rest in inactive mode. So we're just going to say tk ssh repo, which is great. And then it's going to prompt me to say, go ahead, I've created you a key, an SSH key. Go ahead and copy this into GitHub. So kind of the next step is done inside of GitHub. We'll come in here and we'll create a new repository, which I've got it started with. And you see here, CLI demo live. Currently it's private as well. So we're going to go ahead and click create repository. And now we're going to save the SSH key inside of this repository. So we'll come into deploy keys, create a new deploy key, paste the value in here, and we'll call this permit.io. project key. And we also need to allow write access. This is necessary so that Permit can create commits into this repository. All right, now that this is created, we should see, yes, never used read write. That's great. Now we need specifically from GitHub, we actually need the SSH URL. So you need to copy this as is, the copy URL to clipboard. And now we're going to go back and we're going to paste this in. The next thing it's going to ask us is what branch is the main config. Now, there's a couple of things that are going to happen here all very quickly. First, on the main branch, it's going to publish the default policy that we generate for every single customer, and it's going to publish that immediately. And then it's going to actually make a call and create the additional branches for the environments that I have. So if I look inside of Permit here, I've got two different environments. These will show up as branches inside of GitHub, so that I can manage permissions and move them across the software development lifecycle as makes sense for my organization. And so we should see two branches here. And then we also, when we come in here to add some new policy, we should see commits knowing that this branch is specifically active inside of Permit. So we're going to say this is created on the main branch. Like I said, this is a lot of things happening behind the scene here from an API perspective that the CLI is doing. But we should see here inside, and we do, 3 seconds ago, we see a couple of branches created, which is great. We see this AC, and then we also see this D9, which is perfect. It's exactly what we expect. So let's come back to the CLI. We'll make sure everything's good. I think we're good to close. Now, let's try something. Let's come in here to this development dashboard, and let's create a policy. For the time being, I'm just going to create a ABAC user set. I know that this will generate a policy and it's easy to see the commit. So let's say something like US paying administrator is what we want to create. In this scenario, we're just going to look at the roles because I haven't created permissions yet. So we'll say that the user.roles contains admin. We can do anything else like the user role also contains, or as a superset. There's a bunch of abilities here. And you can also reference other attributes within the user object and have different condition sets. For the sake of the demo, we don't need all of those. We're just going to add a simple one to see that this gets saved down into our repository. So we come back here, do a quick refresh. We see 4 seconds ago this branch. So we know now that the AC486 is the branch that is development. We just know that now because of this commit. And we come in here to look at this, and we've got added a new condition set, US paying administrator. So this kind of gets into exactly how permit is generating policy. Anything that you make changes to on the UI, on the API front, or Terraform provider, it doesn't matter. They all end up as policy as code in the form of Rego or as in the form of data. And permit is in charge of synchronizing these down into the policy decision point that we give you. And so in this scenario, this is exactly what we expected, the US paying administrator, admin, and attribute user.roles, which is exactly what we created in the front end. Now we can come in here into this repository, come back out, and let's look at the DAC one, which is this dev branch we have. We can actually take a look at all of the Rego that permit generates. You see here, there's a few. We can take a look at the root Rego. This specifically is kind of the base policy, and it's pulling in additional policy and debugging. But you see here that there's a default policies.allow. So there's a specific package of permit policies that is doing an allow on all of the calls that we generate. But there's also another one in here, which we combined any of the custom policies with the ones we generate. And as you see here in this note, they're combined and effect. Now we could also support something like coming in here and saying, let's go ahead and comment these out. And let's actually add this to as an or rule instead of an and rule. By putting this inside of the custom allow, inside of this allow, we're actually saying now, instead of it being an and, it's an or. So it's a way for us to kind of manage this custom policy to say, I don't want a combination of the custom policies and the policies that permit generates. I want or. And so there's some flexibility here in this definition. I think for the sake of what we're doing, we'll leave it as is and get into the meat of what we want to talk about, which is the ability to add custom Rego. So you see here inside of the custom directory, everything that's put in here, which could be anything that your organization currently has, or any sort of advanced Rego that's not supported by permit out of the box, you come in here and add it to this repository. And everything inside of this repository is not changed by permit. Anything inside of our permit directory is these are the generated codes. These are the different utilities. These are accessible to you via Rego, but they can be overwritten the next time permit generates. The one exception to that is this custom directory. So you can come in and we'll take a look at root Rego. You see here that there's a kind of a example here where I'm allowing a specific user. I'm allowing test at permit.io. So if I were to uncomment this, I could say, okay, user key when I make a permit check call, even though I haven't created any policy inside of permit, this will allow me to make a check because the key matches here. And I can do custom rules. We actually have we'll go to docs.permit and we'll actually look at a custom Rego example. And you see here, we can find a package. We can define our own packages. And there's some information here that you can follow as a tutorial. But at the end of the day, you end up with a kind of custom Rego file. And this one is actually doing a time-based temporary admin role. So in this scenario, I'm saying that the policy isn't allowing, and if the temp administrator role has been assigned to the user and the time is within the time that I've set, they're going to have this temporary admin access. Now, even though I've assigned this admin role, I can actually say things like, even though they have access to the role and it's been assigned, I'm only allowing time between, you see there, 2023 January 1st, 2023 to January 1st, 2024. So this is going to be false. But if I extended this to 2026 or a given time, it's actually going to allow me to access it based on that administration rule. So you can do things like custom time rules. You can do other things like custom packages and deny rules, custom deny rules, which we actually have covered in the tutorial up here. So feel free to follow along in this one. For now, what we're going to do is let's just come in here and edit this and turn all of these off. Oh, don't need that. That is a comment. And so is this. And we're going to commit this. So when we commit this, this is actually going to save this and get into the policy decision point. And so now we can do a couple things. So if we come back in here and we look for an OPA command, we can actually do things like look to see those connected policy. So let's go ahead and come back here. And actually, before we do that, let's come back to this set. And I'm going to connect a PDP. You can do this via the CLI as well. I don't know the command off the top of my head, so I'm just going to start one manually. But the CLI does also allow you to start this PDP. I'm going to expose the OPA port, and I'm going to give this a go and let this start. Which is great. Should pull down. Oh, look, we have an error in the custom policy rule, so we know that it's coming in. What didn't it like? Well, we know we have an error there. That's great. Not exactly what I expected, but we can come in here and see what's going on. My custom rule. I don't actually have my custom rule defined. Let's go ahead and edit this. Commit these changes. And now let's see how the PDP behaves. There we go. Looks like we had a problem with the following. A few questions are coming through as well. So where does the underlying discrepancy perform the narration? A loop for the diode. I'm not sure that's relevant. I'm new with Rego. What's the easiest way to get started with writing custom policies, validate and test before we commit? Honestly, I think this path that we are demonstrating now is the easiest because Permit has the ability to handle multiple projects, right? Inside of here, I've got just this one-off project for the live demo, but I also have a development environment. And so inside of your environments, you have the ability to kind of move from one environment to another. They're wholly contained instances here of Permit. So coming in here and defining your policy and getting resources added and set is the best way to start. And anything that falls out of this specific rule comes into custom Rego. Now, Rego is the custom policy language for Open Policy Agent. And there's actually a Open Policy Agent Rego playground that is really handy for examples on play.openpolicyagent.com. And you can kind of come in here and put inputs and get outputs. Now, the difference here really is around permits generated functionality. We have created for you an easy way to define allow rules. So inside of our check function, don't need to print. We are operating mostly and solely currently on allow rules. And so a user.check passes in a user action resource. And what that looks like from an SDK perspective is I'm passing in John create document. Now, this is actually making a call underlying to OPA to the allow rule, that global allow rule that we saw for permit in the root. It's making a call to this file, and it's making a call to the allow endpoint. And so then it's pulling in all the policies allow and all the custom allow, and it's making a decision. So it will pull all those in, combine them in, and make a check based on the user action resource that have been provided. And you can pass also additional parameters like additional attributes, additional information. And there's also additional context that we can pass for, if we look up here, we can pass additional context specifically for custom Rego. So to get started, I think with Rego, there is an idea here to play around with the Rego playground. Feel free also to come to our Slack community and ask questions. All of our team is in there ready to answer custom Rego questions or any other permit specific questions, but we can help get you started if it's something that's not in here and point you in the right direction. Another question we have is Rego required for ABAC through permit? Rego is always required if the policy engine is Open Policy Agent. However, we generate the ABAC condition sets for you and any of the ABAC rules. So if I come in here to permit, did I create this? I may have created this in A, or may not have saved it. Where did my user set go? Ah, there it is. So when I create a user set, as we saw here, this is where I'm defining like a US paying administrator. And just to kind of take this further, I can come in here to my directory and I can go onto the user value and add a new attribute like location. And now every user is now going to have this attribute location available to them. And I can add as many attributes here as you want. And you see the different types. We have string, number, Boolean, an array of strings, object if you want, or an array of objects to match the JSON data types that you expect. Same thing is true for tenant attributes. I can add additional tenant attributes, and we can go ahead and say, like, what's the tenant ID? And we'll call it a string for now. And any of these values now can be used inside of permit. So when I come into the policy and ABAC rules and I look at this set, I can say things like does the role contain admin? Yes. And does the location match US or USA or whatever the location code is that you're expecting to match on? And so now this condition set specifically really is looking at US paying administrator. Now I still haven't created a role here. So I still need like an admin role, which is what I'm basing it on. We'll create this. And so now let's create a resource as well. Well, actually, let's do banana to make it less confusing. And yes, sure, create. And let's say the banana has a color. Great. So in the policy editor, I should see, let's come to this view. I see on this card view that I have an admin role. And so I can say the admin role has the create, delete, read. Actually, they're not going to have delete or update. But if they are in the US and paying administrator, I'm going to allow them to delete and update. So the default admin role is going to allow them to create and read only if they are US. I didn't actually have a paying set yet, so I can do that as well. Come back to directory and say something like is paying. And we can set this to a Boolean value. And these values, one, they can be stored inside of permit, inside of this user directory. So when I come in here to create a user, I can specify, yes, we'll continue without a role. I can come in here to the attribute section and add these individual attributes. Is paying is true. So now Bob has that value set, but we're still not doing anything with it. So we need to come back to the ABAC rule and actually create the final one. They are an admin, they are US, but we also want to see if they are a paying customer. So if this equals true, now the condition set that we see here, you see a summation. This is telling us that it's not just a role, but also a dynamically conditioned role. It contains a role, plus it contains attributes that's dynamically passed. And like you saw in the directory, I can pass those attributes inside of permit when you create the user or synchronize the user. But I can also do this inside of the permit check function. I can come in and use just-in-time attributes. So I can, instead of have has approval here, I could do something like is paying. And I could do that on the user object or on the resource itself. So it's mandatory, to answer your question, Jake. It's mandatory and required for ABAC, but permit handles it out of the box. So you don't have to write any custom Rego to get started with ABAC user sets for something like a US paying administrator, or resource sets, like maybe I want to create a old banana. And what is an old banana? We'll say that the resource type is a banana, and this is when the color equals black. Not going to eat it. So on this resource, I can actually create specific, kind of getting into more options here. Let's say like eat is another thing you would do on a banana. Maybe you'd throw it as well. THROW. And save this. Now in the policy editor, I could say, what is an admin able to do? Well, they're able to throw it. but a US paying administrator is able to eat it. And so I can combine the resource set ABAC and the old. And this ends up, and if we save this, what we'll see inside of our custom Rego or inside of permit is our repository is, let's see, that was 31 seconds ago. That's great. We'll see 10 commits ahead. That's because we've been very active inside of permit. And we see here now that there is a condition set called alt banana, US paying administrator, and they've been updated along the way. So I don't have to do ABAC. Now, if I wanted to do if I wanted to set an expiration on the admin role, that's where I would go to the custom Rego and say, let me create what my specific timeout is for the administrator. All right, other great questions. So another thing we can do with the CLI, specifically with Open Policy Agent, is that we can see those as they come down. We have here the custom Rego. Let's actually go open up a new tab and let's do permit OPA policy. Let's come back here and make sure we have all the server URL. We'll copy that to there. Well, give me a second. Let me just find my. There it is. Let's move this back to the right location. There we go. Apologies for that. So yes, it's on localhost 81. Now let's have the API key, and we need to grab that from permit. So come back in. Whatever project you're working in, for those familiar with permit, you can actually come in here and copy the environment, or you can always come to connect and find it here inside of the connecting to be able to run. So let's paste this in. And we're going to live CI development. So you see here, we actually can see the specific condition sets and filters, all of the ones that are coming down, and we can see the root and custom Rego. We should also see any of the Rego that comes down in from permit should show up here as well. And there we go, is the custom root Rego, and we see all of the different columns and formats that have come down for this specific package and rule. So there's a lot of flexibility within the CLI to be able to handle it. Any sort of integration with custom ops. Really, to get started, as a best practice for deploying into production anyways, we recommend you doing this. And now it's very easy via the CLI to kind of set up integration with GitHub. Currently, it works with GitHub, but it's the same sort of commands if you want to use Bitbucket or Azure DevOps. It's SSH configuration on type of Git, so it should work the same. And you can always, any sort of custom policies that you need to add can be added inside of this directory that we've created for you in your permit branch. All right, looking at some questions. All right, nothing else. This kind of concludes the CLI demo and even the CLI week. What we have now is kind of a raffle for the week. So let me pull this up. We'll find all the users that have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, I'll give you a couple of minutes. So come in here to the way this shows up is inside of permit. We'll actually look at GitHub. Come to permit.io. And we're looking for Stargazers. Where is it? It's permit CLI. I was already there. Should have used that one. We'll come here. So we're looking for likes on this repository. Come in here and get it real quick. If you're still watching, make sure you get a star on it so that we can get you into the raffle. And while you're doing that, I'll look for more questions, comments, or thoughts, insults. If you also want to direct them my way, feel free. Otherwise, we'll wrap up in another minute or two. And while you're adding, come in here and see, still just got 96. Give you another minute to add. I'm going to pull open the Another screen, I'm going to pull open the user list. And I'm going to open up a raffle. Yep, thanks, Ryan. You can always scan the QR code. I forget that all is up there. Scan it and like it. Yep, great. See them coming through. Give you another minute to come through. A couple more seconds. While I pull down the list of users, we'll come in here. Oh, yeah, see more coming through. Keep them coming. All right. Get about 10 more seconds while I pull down the list. All right. Let's copy this. It's for a keyboard. And let's come. Come to a rifle wheel. All right, we'll spin it off and see who is selected. All right. Mohammed Nizad. You are the winner of the keyboard. Pull this over here real quick to show. We have a winner of the people added. So I will have Gabriel reach out to you via email. Thank you all for participating in the CLI launch week. If you have any other questions, join our Slack community. Go to permit.io, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's a Slack. I'm in there. Gabriel's in there. Feel free to DM me if you have any questions, or inside of Permit SaaS, or there's an OPA section as well. We'd love to see you all in there and chatting about OPA. And if you have any questions about deployment or custom Rego or how to add a new rule that you have, or any thoughts, feel free to join us in there. All right, everyone. Thank you all so much.